There is a stretch of land on this planet so ancient and so geologically extreme that scientists are still finding things inside it that defy explanation. The Australia the world knows best is its cities, beaches, and wildlife. But there is another Australia entirely. One most Australians have never seen. One most maps do not bother to show. And one that contains places so strange and so remote that the first people to photograph them were accused of fabricating the images. Today, we are going inside 17 of those places. Not the postcard destinations, not the tourist circuit. The ones that require permits, four-wheel drives, and in some cases, cave diving equipment rated for the longest underwater passages on the planet. Some were unknown to European settlers for over 2 centuries. Others contain geological formations that should not exist at this latitude. And at least one holds human remains that rewrote everything we thought we knew about the first migration into this continent. These are 17 hidden places in Australia that should not exist. Number 1. Coober Pedy, the underground city that chose to disappear. There is a town in the South Australian outback where the temperature routinely hits 52 degrees Celsius above ground, and so the people who live there simply stopped living above ground. Coober Pedy sits roughly 850 kilometres north of Adelaide, in a landscape so desolate it has been used as the filming location for post-apocalyptic movies, including Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and Pitch Black. And yet underneath it, there is a fully functioning town. The first opal was discovered at Coober Pedy in 1915 by a 14-year-old boy named Willie Hutchison. What he found would eventually make this patch of desert responsible for roughly 90% of the world's opal supply. Miners dug tunnels looking for stone and eventually realized those tunnels could also be the rooms they slept in. The temperature underground stays a constant 23 degrees year-round. Today, Coober Pedy has an underground church, an underground art gallery, underground hotels, and approximately 2,000 dugouts used as permanent residences. Walking the main street, you see nothing but mounds of dirt and exhaust pipes protruding from the ground. Those exhaust pipes are the ventilation systems for the living rooms below. Number 2. Lake Hillier, the lake that is inexplicably pink. Off the southern coast of Western Australia, on the edge of Middle Island in the Recherche Archipelago, there is a lake the colour of bubblegum. Not at sunrise, not because of a seasonal algal bloom. The water in Lake Hillier is deep candy pink every single day of the year, and it stays pink even when you take the water out of the lake and put it in a glass. The contrast against the white sand shore and the blue Southern Ocean just beyond is so extreme that aerial photographs were dismissed as edited images when they first circulated online. The lake was first recorded by the English navigator Matthew Flinders in 1802, who noted the colour in his journal but could not explain it. The pink comes from a combination of a salt-loving algae called Dunaliella salina and pink pigmented bacteria called halobacteria that thrive in hypersaline conditions. The salt concentration in Lake Hillier is approximately 10 times that of ordinary seawater, and you would not be swimming anywhere because the lake sits entirely within a nature reserve with no public access. The only way to see Lake Hillier is from the air. Number 3. The Pinnacles, a Martian landscape. 2 hours from Perth, 2 hours north of Perth, inside Numbung National Park, there is a field of ancient limestone spires rising out of yellow sand. Some are no taller than a man's knee. Others stand 4 meters high. There are thousands of them, covering roughly 17 square kilometers, standing for between 25 and 30,000 years. They look less like a natural formation and more like the ruins of a civilization that never got written down. The pinnacles formed beneath the sand during a wetter period of Australian history, when rainwater dissolved the limestone and left harder cores behind. As the climate dried, the sand shifted and the spires were exposed. But the shapes the erosion produced give the landscape a personality that pure geology cannot fully account for. The Pinnacles sit in dead silence, except for the wind, with no birds, no trees, and no signs of anything living nearby. Number 4. Wolfe Creek Crater, the impact site that took 2 centuries to find. In the Great Sandy Desert of Western Australia, half a day's drive from the nearest town of Halls Creek, there is a crater nearly a kilometre wide and 60 metres deep. Wolfe Creek Crater was formed when a meteorite weighing roughly 50,000 tonnes hit this spot approximately 300,000 years ago. The impact released energy equivalent to multiple nuclear detonations. The crater rim is almost perfectly circular, and the interior has its own miniature ecosystem. Gypsum deposits form a flat white floor. Dingo tracks cross it in the mornings. The walls, stained red and orange by iron oxides, drop vertically in a way that gives the interior the appearance of an alien arena. Wolfe Creek was unknown to non-Indigenous Australians until 1947, when spotted from a survey aircraft. The Jaru Aboriginal people called it Kandamalol and described it as the entry point of a rainbow serpent from the stars, which aligns with the meteorite's reconstructed northeastern trajectory in the night sky. Number 5. Dalhousie Springs, the desert oasis fed by 2-million-year-old rain. In Undara National Park in South Australia, near the edge of the Simpson Desert, there are approximately 60 hot springs bubbling out of the earth. They are part of the Great Artesian Basin, one of the largest underground freshwater reservoirs on the planet, stretching beneath 22% of the Australian continent. The water fell as rain over 2 million years ago and emerges here at temperatures between 38 and 45 degrees Celsius. The result is a series of pools in the middle of a desert where ambient temperatures reach 50 degrees, surrounded by lush vegetation that belongs in a tropical river system. Endemic fish species found only in these springs have been isolated from every other water system on Earth for so long they have developed entirely distinct evolutionary traits. Dalhousie Springs contains at least 7 species of fish that exist nowhere else in the world. The largest pool is approximately 30 meters wide and flows continuously, fed by water that has been traveling underground for over 2 million years. Number 6. The Bungle Bungles, the formation that was hidden in plain sight. In the Kimberley region of Western Australia, there is a range of sandstone towers striped in alternating bands of orange silica and dark grey cyanobacteria. The Bungle Bungles, formerly Purnululu National Park, rise up to 200 meters above the surrounding plains. They are shaped in rounded domes, not the jagged peaks typical of most rock formations. And the effect from the air is unlike any geological category you have encountered before. Here is the extraordinary part. The Bungle Bungles were not documented by non-Indigenous Australians until 1983, when a film crew spotted them from a light aircraft. This is within living memory. The formation covers roughly 450 square kilometers, visible from the air for 2 centuries of European presence, and nobody in the outside world knew it existed. The Kija Aboriginal people called the area Purnululu, meaning sandstone. They did not need to discover what they had never lost. Number 7. Lawn Hill Gorge, the jungle that has no business being there. In the semi-arid savanna of far northwest Queensland, roughly 100 kilometers from the nearest sealed road, there is a gorge of brilliant green water cutting through ancient limestone cliffs. Lawn Hill Gorge sits inside Boojamoola National Park, and it is one of the most startling landscape contradictions in Australia. The surrounding country is dry, flat, and harsh. Then the gorge opens, and there is a permanent freshwater river surrounded by rainforest palms, freshwater crocodiles, and vegetation so dense it looks transplanted from a tropical creek system hundreds of kilometers away. The water feeding Lawn Hill Creek comes from springs in the hills to the south and the constant flow through limestone has carved gorges up to 30 meters deep. The walls hold ancient Aboriginal rock art. Canoe trees, from which bark was stripped to make watercraft, are still visible along the banks. The freshwater turtles in the gorge are descendants of species present here since before Australia's interior dried out, before the continent became the arid landscape it is today. They are living evidence of a wetter Australia that survives in this one gorge. Number 8. Kati Thanda-Lake Eyre, the lake that is almost never a lake. Kati Thanda-Lake Eyre is technically Australia's largest lake. It is also, for the majority of the time, not a lake at all. It is a vast salt flat, the lowest point on the continent at approximately 15 meters below sea level, covering around 9,500 square kilometers. The surface is a blinding white plain of salt crust, cracked into polygonal patterns, extending to every horizon. For most years, it holds only a thin film of brine or no water at all. But when extraordinary rainfall events in Queensland and the Northern Territory coincide, floodwaters travel thousands of kilometers through the Channel Country and eventually reach Kati Thanda. This happens roughly 3 times per century. When it does, the lake transforms within weeks. Hundreds of thousands of pelicans, banded stilts, and silver gulls appear from nowhere in the middle of the desert to breed at the suddenly filled lake. Scientists believe these birds detect atmospheric pressure changes from over 1,000 kilometers away. The lake does not wait for them. They arrive while the water is still rising. Number 9. The horizontal falls. The tidal phenomenon that defies direction. In the Kimberley region of Western Australia, in a remote section of Talbot Bay, there are 2 narrow gaps in a series of coastal cliffs through which the tide does something that should not be physically possible. As the tide changes in the open ocean, the difference in water levels on either side of these rock walls can reach up to 5 meters. The water forces through the narrow gaps at speeds that create what appear to be waterfalls running sideways through solid rock. They are called the horizontal falls, and they represent one of the most intense tidal phenomena in the southern hemisphere. The gaps are narrow enough that a boat must pass through single file. The rush of water creates standing waves, whirlpools, and turbulence severe enough to flip a vessel with wrong timing. The surrounding marine park contains tiger sharks. The only way to see the horizontal falls is by seaplane from Broome or Derby, and even from the air, the visual of water running sideways through solid rock takes a moment to process. Number 10. Cocklebiddy Cave. The longest underwater passage anyone has survived. On the Nullarbor Plain in Western Australia, there is a cave system so vast and deeply flooded that it took the world's most experienced cave divers with specialized equipment to map only sections of it. Cocklebiddy Cave contains what is believed to be the longest underwater cave passage ever surveyed, stretching approximately 6 kilometers into the flooded limestone beneath the Nullarbor. A 1983 French-Australian expedition reached 6.1 kilometers from the entrance, a world record that stood for years. The divers carried equipment through a dry section of the cave, then submerged into passages so dark that a torch failure at depth would have been fatal. The Nullarbor Plain sits above one of the world's largest cave systems, largely unexplored and in many sections permanently flooded. The limestone was formed when this entire region was the floor of a shallow sea. Some sections have been reached by divers and never reached again. The formations in the permanently dark passages, stalactites, cave pearls, and crystal deposits have been developing in absolute silence for tens of thousands of years. Number 11. The Lost City, Litchfield. Stone towers that build themselves. Inside Litchfield National Park in the Northern Territory, about 90 minutes south of Darwin, there is an area called the Lost City, where sandstone blocks have eroded over millions of years into shapes that look disturbingly like the ruins of a constructed settlement. The blocks are roughly rectangular, they stand in clusters. Some have flat tops. Some form what appear to be walls, corridors, and rooms. They are not ruins of anything human. They are entirely natural formations of tabletop range sandstone, and the erosion that shaped them ran along natural joints and fractures to produce something the human eye cannot easily process as geological rather than architectural. The lost city receives relatively few visitors because reaching it requires a walk through dense monsoon scrub and across creek systems that are not always passable. The sandstone here is over 1.4 billion years old, and the shape's erosion carved into it look like the deliberate work of a civilization. The Leveque and Wajaman people have oral traditions about this landscape that describe it in ways that do not require the formations to be explained as natural, because within their worldview, the distinction between natural and built holds no meaning. Number 12. Mungo National Park, the place where Australia's oldest story was found. In far southwest New South Wales, at the dry bed of an ancient lake called Lake Mungo, the bones of a modern human were discovered in 1974. The individual became known as Mungo Man. He was buried with ritual ochre, indicating intentional ceremony. He died approximately 42,000 years ago. At the time of discovery, Mungo Man was the oldest known ritual burial on Earth. He rewrote the scientific understanding of human migration into Australia. He was found in a landscape called the Walls of China, a series of eroded lunettes that the wind had carved over millennia. The Walls of China at Mungo stretch roughly 30 kilometers and rise up to 30 meters. They are cream, brown, and orange, layered like geological cake, folding in curves that follow the edge of the ancient lake shore. Walking alongside them is walking alongside 42,000 years of sediment record. Megafauna bones, including the Diprotodon, the largest marsupial that ever lived, have been found in the Mungo sediment layers. The people who lived here 40,000 years ago hunted rhinoceros-sized animals in a landscape that no longer exists. Number 13. Marble Bar, the town that holds the global endurance record for heat. In the Pilbara region of Western Australia, there is a town of approximately 200 people that holds a world record no other location has broken. Marble Bar recorded temperatures above 37.8 degrees Celsius for 160 consecutive days between October 1923 and April 1924, the longest heat streak of any inhabited place on Earth. The town sits in iron red rock country, treeless hills, and dry creek beds. The temperature record is not an anomaly. It is a typical Marble Bar summer. Despite everything that description implies, Marble Bar has been continuously occupied since the 1890s gold rush. The pub has been serving drinks since 1893. The community swimming pool is essential infrastructure, not a luxury. Marble Bar exists as proof that the human capacity to adapt to extreme environments is more stubborn than the environments themselves. Number 14. Mirima National Park, the other Bungle Bungles that almost nobody visits. In the East Kimberley region of Western Australia, on the outskirts of Kununurra, there is a national park containing beehive-shaped sandstone formations almost identical in appearance to the Bungle Bungles, located 350 kilometers away. Mirima National Park is sometimes called the Hidden City. Its formations are the same orange and dark banded sandstone towers, shaped in the same rounded domes, carved by the same ancient geological forces. They stand inside a park you can walk through in an afternoon, accessible by sealed road from a regional town centre. And virtually nobody outside of Kununurra knows it exists. The formations at Mirima are between 360 and 375 million years old, among the oldest rock structures accessible to the general public anywhere in Australia. The Miriwung people have occupied this landscape for at least 40,000 years. Their name, Mirima, means this is our country. The banded towers hold sheltered valleys and gorges between them. In the wet season, the gorges fill with water, and the orange stone reflects in pools that have no business being beautiful, this close to a town this small. Number 15, Lake Gairdner. The salt flat where land speed records are broken. On the edge of the Gawler Ranges in South Australia, there is a salt lake covering approximately 4,400 square kilometres. Lake Gairdner is dry for most of the year, its surface a flat expanse of white salt crust extending to every horizon. The silence here is described by visitors as something physical, a weight in the air rather than simply the absence of sound. In the 1960s, the land speed community discovered that Gairdner's surface was hard, flat, and long enough to run vehicles faster than anywhere else in the Southern Hemisphere. Lake Gairdner Speed Week has been held irregularly since 1969. In 2019, a jet-powered vehicle reached 802 kilometers per hour on the surface of the lake. The Aboriginal Barngarla people have deep historical and cultural connections to Lake Gairdner. For them, the lake is not a racetrack. It is a sacred site where the country holds memory of a time when water was present here. That tension sits over the lake as clearly as the salt haze rising from it on summer mornings. Number 16, Cape Leveque, the cape at the end of the corrugated road. At the northern tip of the Dampier Peninsula in Western Australia, 200 kilometres north of Broome, on a road that is corrugated red dirt for most of its length, there is a cape where red Pindan cliffs drop to a white beach and turquoise water of a colour that has no standard name. Cape Leveque sits at the meeting point of the Indian Ocean and the Timor Sea, and the combination of iron red soil, white sand, and the watercolour produces something that photographers have spent careers trying to accurately capture and mostly failed. The colours are too saturated, too opposed, too unlikely to read as unedited. The Bardi-Jawi people have lived at Cape Leveque for tens of thousands of years. The community at Cooljarman runs an eco-resort allowing visitors to camp, but access to parts of the peninsula remains under community control. Getting there requires commitment. The road punishes unprepared cars, and the reward, when the red cliffs finally appear over the scrub, is a landscape so different from ordinary experience that the drive back out feels like returning from somewhere that should not exist. Number 17, Undara Lava Tubes, the hollow mountain range built by a single eruption. In far north Queensland, there is a system of lava tubes that formed 190,000 years ago when a volcano in the Mount Garnet area erupted. The lava surface cooled while molten rock beneath kept flowing, then drained away and left hollow basalt tubes some 23 meters wide. The Undara system is one of the longest of its kind in the world, extending 160 kilometers from the source. Walking into an Undara tube is walking into a hollow mountain. The walls are smooth and dark. The geometry is perfectly cylindrical. Sound moves strangely inside them. The temperature drops suddenly at the entrance. Where parts of the roof have collapsed over the past 190,000 years, rainforest has grown down into the tubes, creating pockets of intense green in the black basalt darkness. The entire ecosystem inside depends on a geological event that happened 190,000 years ago and has not repeated since. Australia is the oldest continent on Earth. Its rocks are the oldest, its deserts the most ancient, and its geological story runs deeper than almost anywhere else on the planet. But what makes these 17 places remarkable is not just their age, it is the fact that they exist in spite of every expectation, from a pink lake and an underground city to a cave system where divers entered and never returned from, and a place where water runs sideways through solid rock. The Australia most people picture is the Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, the Great Barrier Reef. That Australia is real, but the Australia in this video operates on geological time, where a 190,000-year-old lava tube is considered recent, and a salt lake that fills 3 times per century is considered active. If any of these 17 places stood out, leave a comment below telling us which one you want a full documentary on. We are planning extended videos on several of them. Subscribe so you do not miss them.